Scarlett Monroe had always lived her life in the shadows of grand events, never the center of them. She wasn't the one photographed under sparkling chandeliers or dressed in designer gowns. She was the one making sure everything ran perfectly, slipping between guests unnoticed. That's why when a shimmering white envelope, edged in gold, appeared at her small Brooklyn apartment's doorstep, her pulse quickened. Her fingers trembled as she turned it over, spotting the elegant, embossed signature, Ethan Calloway. The name alone carried weight in New York's elite circles. The Ethan Calloway, young, wealthy, enigmatic, and utterly out of reach. Scarlett's heart thudded in her chest as she carefully opened the invitation. Inside was a sleek ivory card inviting her to the Calloway Winter Gala, the city's most talked about, impossible to get into event. She stared at it, stunned. This had to be a mistake. Why would a man like Ethan Calloway personally invite someone like her? A behind-the-scenes planner barely making rent. What Scarlett didn't know was that Ethan Calloway had been quietly observing her for years. His world was one of calculated moves and polished surfaces. But Scarlett was different. She wasn't trying to impress anyone, yet she enchanted every room she touched. Ethan remembered the first time he saw her at a charity gala she designed 3 years ago. The way she laughed with the staff, the soft, determined glow in her eyes. He had stood in the corner, drink untouched, captivated by the quiet confidence she wore like a second skin. Event after event, he sought out her work, hiding his involvement behind aliases and private bookings. Every floral arrangement, every glimmering light string, and every thoughtful detail she curated only drew him in deeper. To him, Scarlett was magic, an invisible artist transforming ordinary nights into something unforgettable. Now Ethan was done watching from the sidelines. He wanted her in his world, even if just for a night. And so, the invitation was sent, his signature a promise of something more, though Scarlett couldn't have possibly guessed how deeply her life was about to change. She clutched the invitation to her chest, 1,000 questions spinning in her mind. Who was this man really? And what did he want with her? Scarlett didn't know it yet, but this was no random gesture. It was the start of a story that had been quietly building behind the curtains for years, one she was finally about to step into. The night air was crisp as Scarlett stepped out of the car, her deep red gown shimmering like embers under the soft glow of the Calloway estate lights. The grand ballroom ahead was a masterpiece, towering crystal chandeliers, walls draped in velvet, and the gentle hum of violins filling the air like a lullaby. Scarlett had planned dozens of events in places like this, but never as a guest. Tonight she was no longer the girl behind the scenes. She was part of the magic. As she entered, heads turned. The gown hugged her curves perfectly, her silky hair cascading over her shoulders. Scarlett wasn't used to the spotlight, but tonight it followed her. The lights danced off her sequins like scattered stars, and for the first time, she felt beautiful, untouchable, yet unnervingly exposed. Her gaze swept the crowd, and there, across the ballroom, stood Ethan Calloway, tall, commanding, his black suit tailored to perfection. His blue eyes shimmered like a frozen sea, and though surrounded by socialites, his gaze cut through the crowd, landing squarely on her. A pulse of electricity surged through Scarlett's chest. It wasn't polite curiosity, it was something heavier, something inevitable. Their eyes locked, and for a fleeting second, the bustling room seemed to fall away. Conversations blurred into background noise, the chandeliers dimmed to a soft glow, and it was just them. Scarlett and Ethan, tethered by an invisible thread neither of them could name. Ethan moved toward her with quiet confidence, the crowd parting effortlessly in his wake. He was magnetic, every step measured, as though this moment had been carefully planned. When he reached her, his voice was low, rich like velvet. "May I have this dance?" Scarlett hesitated, her heart pounding, but her hand found his. The warmth of his touch made her breath hitch. They glided onto the dance floor, his hand resting gently at her waist, his other entwining with hers. Their bodies moved in perfect rhythm, as if they had danced this way 100 times in another life. Yet beneath the beauty of the moment, Scarlett couldn't shake a growing sense of mystery. Ethan's gaze lingered too long, his touch too deliberate. His silence spoke louder than words, like there was something buried in his heart he was desperate, yet afraid to reveal. Scarlett's pulse raced, torn between the thrill of the unknown and the suspicion that this night was only the surface of something deeper, something secret. She could feel it in the way his thumb brushed against her skin, in the storm behind those piercing blue eyes. And as the violin swelled, Scarlett knew. This wasn't just a dance. It was the beginning of something far more dangerous. The night had grown heavier, thick with a tension Scarlett couldn't name. The distant hum of music spilled out onto the grand balcony, where city lights twinkled like scattered jewels below. Scarlett's heart thudded in her chest as she stood there, the cool breeze brushing her skin, the deep red fabric of her gown glimmering in the moonlight. Ethan was beside her, so close, so achingly beautiful in the shadows, and yet 1,000 words remained unsaid between them. Champagne warmth, stolen glances, and a reckless kind of courage surged inside her. The weight of years spent unseen, of longing tucked in quiet corners of her soul, broke free. Without giving herself time to second guess, Scarlett reached for Ethan, pulling him into the darkness of the balcony's edge, the world falling away around them. And then she kissed him. It wasn't planned, wasn't poised or perfect. It was soft, hesitant at first, a question in the shape of a touch. But within seconds, the air shifted. Ethan responded, his arms wrapping around her with a kind of desperation, as though this was a moment he'd rehearsed in his mind 1,000 times. His lips claimed hers like a promise, deepening the kiss, chasing all the lonely years away. The connection was electric, a crackling current that made Scarlett forget her name, the Gala, the years of hiding behind curtains and flower arrangements. When they finally parted, breathless, Scarlett felt the world tilt beneath her feet. She searched his eyes, those impossible blue depths, and whispered, barely trusting her own voice, "Why did that feel like more?" For the first time that night, Ethan's polished exterior cracked. His expression softened, vulnerability flickering across his perfect features. His hand brushed a loose strand of hair from her face, lingering at her cheek as though afraid to let her slip away. "Because it always was, Scarlett," he confessed, voice thick with a weight he'd carried too long. "I've loved you for a very long time." The words shattered everything she thought she knew. Scarlett's pulse hammered in her ears. Loved her? But how? They'd barely spoken. Had they? Or had he been there, quietly threading himself into the tapestry of her life without her even realizing it? Questions swirled, but in that charged moment, none of them mattered. The only truth was the lingering warmth of his touch, the echo of his words, and the dawning, impossible thought. Maybe she had been falling too, all along. The night air hung thick with unspoken words as Scarlett gripped the cool marble of the balcony rail, her pulse racing in her ears. Ethan's confession wasn't something she could have ever imagined. His voice was steady, but beneath it lay years of bottled emotion, a story hidden in shadows. "I first saw you 3 years ago," Ethan began, his eyes locked on hers. "You were organizing that charity ball for the children's hospital. You wore this soft blue dress, and you laughed when the lights went out during rehearsal. Everyone else panicked. But you made it a game. You lit up that room, Scarlett. I've never forgotten it." Scarlett's breath hitched. She remembered that night, the flicker of candles she scrambled to find, the jokes she made to keep everyone calm. But she never knew he'd been there, watching. "I started following your career after that," Ethan continued, his voice low, almost reverent. "Every event you touched turned into something magical. I made sure my companies hired you for events, anonymously. I was terrified of stepping out of the shadows because you deserve someone without the weight I carry, without the family name, the expectations, the mistakes I've made." Scarlett felt the ground sway beneath her, emotions battling for dominance, disbelief, wonder, fear. Part of her heart fluttered at the thought that someone had seen her, cherished her from a distance. But another part recoiled, protective and uncertain. "I watched you move on with your life," Ethan admitted softly, his gaze shadowed with regret. I told myself you'd be better off, but I never stopped, Scarlett. Never stopped wanting to be close to you, even if from afar. Tears stung her eyes. No one had ever confessed something like this to her. A love hidden so carefully, so selflessly. She had spent so long building walls around her heart, convinced that love wasn't meant for someone like her. Someone ordinary, invisible. Could she trust this? Could she trust him? Scarlett's voice trembled. Ethan, why now? His expression softened. Because tonight you kissed me, and I realized life's too short to love someone in silence. It left Scarlett overwhelmed, standing at the edge of something beautiful and terrifying. Was this fate or a dangerous game? Could she open her heart to Ethan Calloway, the man who loved her in secret and the one person who could shatter her completely? Just when Scarlett's heart had begun to thaw, just when the walls she'd built so carefully started to crack, the world came crashing down. It happened with cruel precision. A glossy magazine cover splashed across every stand in New York by morning. Calloway engaged to socialite Vanessa Lowell. Power Couple of the Year. Scarlett stared at the image in disbelief. There was Ethan, his arm draped around Vanessa's slender waist, her smirk polished and cold. Vanessa Lowell, the same woman who had once tried to sabotage Scarlett's career, spreading lies to steal a high-profile event from her. The betrayal felt like a dagger twisted deep. Tears pricked her eyes and the weight of humiliation settled heavy in her chest. How could I have been so stupid, she thought bitterly. Had it all been a lie? The balcony confession, the kiss, the tender words. Was she nothing more than a fleeting, foolish distraction for a man already promised to another? Ethan, meanwhile, had no idea of the storm brewing. After that night, he had spent hours searching for Scarlett, calling, texting, even showing up at her apartment, only to be met with silence. Her absence gnawed at him. Something was wrong and he could feel it. When he finally found her days later, standing alone in the same park where they'd once spoken of dreams, the look on her face shattered him. Cold, guarded, broken. Scarlett, he breathed, reaching for her. She recoiled, her hand trembling as she thrust the magazine into his chest. Explain this, she choked out, her voice thick with heartbreak. Ethan's eyes dropped to the cover, his breath catching. His face paled. What? Number Scarlett, this isn't real. I swear to you, I'm not engaged to Vanessa. I never was. She planted this. She's trying to control my company, my family's name. I didn't even know this existed. But Scarlett's heart had been bruised too many times. The memory of his whispered confessions warred against the searing image of him beside Vanessa. I can't, she whispered, backing away. I can't be someone's secret, Ethan. Not again. I can't be that girl who hides while you parade someone else on your arm. Her voice broke, and for the first time in his charmed, privileged life, Ethan Calloway felt powerless. No amount of money, no carefully crafted speech could fix this, because what he'd broken wasn't a contract or a deal. It was trust, and without it, love would crumble. Ethan Calloway wasn't a man accustomed to losing control, but as he stood in front of the cameras, his heart pounded with the weight of the decision he was about to make. Vanessa's deceit had spread like wildfire, and the woman he had once been willing to entertain was now the very thing that threatened to tear everything he loved apart. He had waited too long, played the part of a man who could have it all. The perfect socialite, the powerful business mogul, the heir to his family's empire. But none of it had ever mattered to him. Not really. Because the only thing that had ever truly mattered, the only thing he had silently desired for years, was standing on the other side of that veil of lies. Scarlett. At the press conference, Ethan stood before the crowd with an air of quiet resolve. The reporters had been ruthless, firing questions about his engagement to Vanessa, his plans, his future. But this time, Ethan was ready. He'd let them ask. Let them believe their false narratives. But now the truth would be his. He wasn't hiding anymore. Not from the world, and certainly not from Scarlett. I've been silent for too long, Ethan began, his voice cutting through the noise of flashing cameras. And now, I need to say this once and for all. The woman I love is not Vanessa Lowell. It's Scarlett Monroe. Gasps echoed through the room, but Ethan stood tall, unwavering. For years, I watched her from a distance, terrified to step forward because I believed she deserved a life free of my burdens. But I can't pretend anymore. Scarlett has been my inspiration, my muse, the one person who has made me feel alive in a world that often feels cold. I've loved her quietly, secretly, and I can no longer hide that from the world. She is the woman I want beside me. Not Vanessa, not anyone else. Just Scarlett. Scarlett sat in her apartment, her hands trembling as she held the remote in her lap. Her breath hitched as she watched Ethan stand there, his eyes filled with raw sincerity, a man stripped bare of all pretenses. Each word he spoke landed like a balm on the wound Vanessa had inflicted. He didn't just confess. He declared his love, not just to her, but to the world. Tears spilled down Scarlett's cheeks as she finally understood. All the doubts, the fears, the walls she had built around her heart, it had all been about protecting herself from a love that she'd always known, deep down, was meant to be. And yet, she had run from it, afraid of being hurt again, afraid of loving someone who might never feel the same. But Ethan had shown her that love wasn't something to fear. It was something to embrace. That night, Scarlett stood in front of her mirror, the soft light of the city casting a glow through her window. She took a deep breath, wiped her eyes, and made a decision. She wasn't going to hide anymore, not from Ethan and not from herself. With the city's skyline as her backdrop, Scarlett walked to the very place where it had all begun, the balcony overlooking the lights of New York City. Her heart raced as she stepped outside into the cool night air. And there, in the soft glow of the moon, stood Ethan. He had been waiting for her. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice trembling as she took a step toward him. He turned, his eyes full of hope and regret, his gaze fixed on her as though she were the only person in the world. "I couldn't let you go. Not again." Scarlett's heart swelled as she closed the distance between them. She had fought herself for so long, but now she knew with absolute certainty that this was where she was meant to be, with him. "I was afraid," she admitted, her voice catching in her throat. "Afraid of trusting, afraid of being hurt. But I see now. I see that what we have is real." Ethan stepped closer, his hand reaching for hers, his touch warm and steady. "Scarlett, I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes, and I know I hurt you. But I will spend the rest of my life proving that my heart belongs to you." Tears welled in Scarlett's eyes as she looked into his, seeing the depth of his sincerity. In that moment, all the hurt, all the fear, melted away. She had found her way back to him, to the love she had been running from for so long. "I love you, Ethan," she whispered, her voice soft but certain, "and I believe in us." And with that, beneath the stars and the soft glow of the city, their lips met in a kiss that sealed the truth of their love. A love that had endured the shadows, the lies, and the fears. A love that, no matter what, would never be hidden again. The city of New York, bathed in the soft glow of its iconic lights, seemed to hold its breath as Scarlett and Ethan stood face to face on the balcony. The cold winter air wrapped around them, but neither of them seemed to notice. There were no more barriers, no more doubts, no more secrets between them. Only two hearts, raw and open, ready to embrace the love that had always been there, lingering just beneath the surface. Ethan's gaze never wavered as he looked into Scarlett's eyes, his voice soft but steady, filled with an honesty that made her heart ache. "I'm not perfect, Scarlett," he whispered, the weight of his words echoing in the quiet of the night. "But my love for you, it's the one thing in my life that's always been true." Scarlett felt a rush of warmth flood through her, and for the first time in years, the walls she'd built around her heart began to crumble. She had spent so much of her life hiding, guarding herself from the pain of potential heartbreak. But here with Ethan, there was only the promise of something real, something deep, something that had never been tainted by lies or fear. Her emerald eyes glistened with the tears she had been holding back for so long. Slowly, almost shyly, she stepped closer to him, her breath catching in her chest as she spoke, her voice barely more than a whisper. "And I'm done hiding from it. The words were a release, a declaration, a promise that she would no longer run from the love that had been waiting for her all along. Ethan's heart raced as he reached for her, his fingers trembling slightly as he cupped her face, his touch reverent and tender. "I never wanted you to hide, Scarlett. I just wanted you to see that you're the only one I've ever truly wanted." And then, without another word, they kissed. This time there was no hesitation, no second guessing, no fear, only the undeniable truth of their love. It was as if the entire world fell away. The city's noise, the past, the doubts, all melted into nothingness. In that kiss, there was only Ethan, only Scarlett, only the promise of forever. The space between them vanished, their hearts colliding in a way neither of them had ever experienced before. It was pure, it was whole, and it was the beginning of everything. As they pulled away, breathless and still in each other's arms, the first snowflake of the season drifted down from the sky, landing softly on Scarlett's cheek. She smiled, her heart full in a way she never thought possible. In that moment, everything was perfect. The universe had aligned, bringing them to this place, this time where love no longer felt like a dream, but a reality. Ethan's voice broke the silence, his words filled with an unwavering conviction. "I loved you long before this night, and I'll love you long after." Scarlett closed her eyes, letting the sound of his words wash over her, feeling the weight of them in her soul. They were no longer two people standing on opposite sides of a divide. They had crossed that line together, and now all that mattered was the future they would build. As the snow began to fall more steadily, blanketing the city in a quiet, shimmering layer of white, Scarlett rested her head against Ethan's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. For the first time in her life, she felt at home, and in his arms, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was just the beginning of their forever. They stood there side by side as the snow fell around them, two hearts healing, and a love that would last beyond the stars themselves. This story reminds us all that sometimes the most beautiful connections are born not out of wealth, status, or appearances, but from genuine hearts quietly searching for one another in a noisy world. It shows how love isn't always loud. Sometimes it waits patiently in the shadows, watching, admiring, and hoping for a chance to be seen. Scarlett and Ethan's story teaches us that no matter how ordinary you may feel or how invisible you think you are, in a world chasing glitter and fame, someone out there might be silently admiring your kindness, your warmth, your light. True love transcends social labels, money, or expectations. It's about finding someone who truly sees you, values your spirit, and isn't afraid to fight for you when it matters most. It speaks to those of us who've been hurt, doubted love, or believed our worth was tied to how others perceive us. Love isn't flawless, and neither are people. But what makes it beautiful is the courage to risk, to trust, and to forgive. Life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it, and sometimes what seems like an impossible fairy tale could become your reality if you let your heart stay open. Let Scarlett's courage and Ethan's honesty be a gentle reminder that no lie, no betrayal, and no fear can stand in the way of what's meant to be. Keep believing in unexpected endings and the quiet, steady love that finds you when you aren't looking. If this story touched your heart, made you smile, or gave you hope, I'd be truly grateful if you could subscribe to my channel and hit the bell notification so you never miss another story like this. Your support means everything. Let's keep spreading love, hope, and heartfelt stories together.